AJ Styles just unleashed the most explosive and personal verbal assault on the Judgment Day during a backstage interview that was supposed to be routine, and if you're not absolutely stunned by the phenomenal one's shocking promises of revenge and the raw emotion he displayed while confronting Jackie Redmond about their recent attacks, you clearly don't understand how completely this escalates the most personal rivalry in WWE. What we witnessed wasn't just a typical wrestler interview, it was an unfiltered explosion of rage and frustration from a man who has finally been pushed too far by a faction that made the fatal mistake of targeting someone who built his legendary career on never backing down from anyone. The sight of AJ Styles, normally one of WWE's most composed and professional performers, completely losing his cool during what should have been a standard backstage segment with Jackie Redmond will be replayed for years as the moment the phenomenal one officially declared all-out war on Finn Bálor and the Judgment Day. This wasn't scripted corporate speak, this was genuine fury from a veteran who has had enough of their cowardly tactics and psychological games. You want to know what I think about the Judgment Day? I think they're a bunch of cowards who hide behind numbers because none of them could survive against me one-on-one. Those weren't just inflammatory words designed to create buzz, they were a direct challenge from someone whose legendary career has been built on backing up every single promise with devastating in-ring performance. The intensity in AJ's voice made it crystal clear this was deeply personal. You want to talk about interviews that fundamentally change storyline dynamics and create must-see television? AJ Styles didn't just answer Jackie Redmond's questions, he hijacked the entire segment to deliver a message so threatening and specific that every member of the Judgment Day should be genuinely concerned about the payback that's coming their way. The interview started innocently enough with Jackie asking AJ about recovering from the Judgment Day's recent ambush attack when suddenly the phenomenal one's entire demeanor shifted and the professional wrestler facade completely crumbled to reveal the genuine anger beneath. You know what, Jackie? I'm tired of playing nice and giving diplomatic answers. Let me tell you exactly what I think. But here's what makes this interview absolutely different from typical backstage segments. AJ completely abandoned the usual wrestling interview format and turned it into a platform for issuing specific threats and promises about what he plans to do to each individual Judgment Day member. The specificity and personal nature of his comments crossed lines we rarely see in modern WWE programming. The most shocking moment came when AJ specifically called out Finn Bálor by name and referenced their history together in ways that made this feel less like wrestling rivalry and more like genuine personal animosity. Finn, you and I came up together, we fought side by side in Japan, and I watched you become the leader of a group that represents everything we used to stand against. That betrayal of principles hurts worse than any physical attack. Here's a question that's going to reveal how deep this rivalry has become. Did you notice the genuine pain in AJ's eyes when he talked about feeling personally betrayed by Finn's transformation into the Judgment Day's leader? The actual verbal assault intensified as AJ methodically went through each Judgment Day member and explained exactly what he planned to do to them. Damian Priest, you think you're intimidating? I've faced monsters my entire career and none of them could keep me down. McDonagh, you're a great wrestler but you picked the wrong veteran to target. Dominik, you're living off your father's name while disrespecting everything he built. But the most devastating comments were reserved for Finn Bálor, and the personal nature of AJ's attack revealed layers of history and resentment that most fans weren't aware of. Finn, you used to be someone I respected, someone who represented excellence and honor in this business. Now you're just another guy hiding behind a group because you're afraid to stand on your own. The accusation that Finn is afraid to stand on his own cuts deeper than any physical attack because it questions his very identity as a competitor. AJ wasn't just threatening violence, he was challenging Finn's entire self-perception and legacy, which makes this psychological warfare as much as physical rivalry. Quick question for the wrestling psychology experts: is questioning someone's courage and independence more damaging to their reputation than simply threatening to beat them in a match? The most infuriating aspect for Judgment Day supporters is that AJ backed up every single threat with references to his legendary career accomplishments. I've been IWGP champion, I've been WWE champion, I've main event WrestleMania, and I built my reputation by never backing down from any challenge. The Judgment Day picked a fight with the wrong veteran. The investigation into what triggered this level of intensity from normally composed AJ Styles reveals that the Judgment Day's attacks have become increasingly personal and targeted his family. Sources suggest recent comments about AJ's age and his children watching him get beaten down crossed a line that transformed professional rivalry into genuine personal hatred. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came when AJ addressed Jackie Redmond directly and apologized for the intensity while explaining why he couldn't hold back anymore. Jackie, I'm sorry for hijacking this interview, but there comes a point where you have to speak truth even if it's uncomfortable. The Judgment Day has been targeting me for months, and I'm done being diplomatic about it. The self-awareness and acknowledgement that he was breaking interview protocol while simultaneously continuing to do it anyway showed someone operating on pure emotion rather than calculated corporate messaging. This wasn't AJ Styles the company man, this was the competitor who has never let anyone disrespect him without consequences. Here's another question for the media training experts: how rare is it to see a top WWE performer completely abandon corporate messaging during an official interview to speak genuinely from the heart? The most powerful moment came when AJ made specific promises about what he plans to do to each Judgment Day member in upcoming matches. "Finn, I'm coming for you first, and when we're finally one-on-one without your group protecting you, I'm going to show everyone why you needed them in the first place. Then I'm systematically going through every single member until the Judgment Day learns that targeting AJ Styles was the biggest mistake of their careers." The systematic approach and specific targeting of each member suggests AJ has been planning this revenge campaign for weeks. This wasn't spontaneous anger, this was calculated fury from someone who has been strategizing about how to dismantle an entire faction while making each member pay individually for their collective crimes. But the most disturbing detail is that AJ's comments may have violated WWE's official interview guidelines about issuing threats and making promises that create liability issues. Legal experts watching the segment reportedly expressed concern that AJ's specific threats could create problems if any actual injuries occur during upcoming matches. The corporate response to AJ completely going off script during an official WWE interview has been notably absent. The fact that WWE hasn't publicly disciplined or corrected AJ's comments suggests they either approve of the intensity he brought or recognize that trying to control him at this point would be counterproductive to the storyline. The fan reaction to AJ's explosive interview has been absolutely overwhelming, with social media erupting in support of the phenomenal one. Wrestling fans worldwide are praising his authenticity, celebrating his willingness to speak genuinely rather than in corporate cliches, and expressing excitement about the upcoming violence he's promised to deliver. Here's a question about authenticity in wrestling: do you prefer interviews that feel scripted and safe, or do you appreciate moments like this where genuine emotion breaks through even if it's uncomfortable? The most interesting business implication is how this interview has affected ticket sales and interest in upcoming shows featuring AJ versus Judgment Day matches. Sources suggest that AJ's verbal assault has created such buzz that venues are reporting increased demand specifically for events where his promised revenge might occur. The testimonies from other wrestlers who watched the interview backstage reveal mixed reactions to AJ's approach. Some performers praised his authenticity and willingness to elevate the rivalry, while others expressed concern that his intensity might create uncomfortable pressure to match the level of emotional investment in their own storylines. But perhaps the most intriguing element is what Jackie Redmond's reaction revealed about the genuine nature of AJ's comments. Her visible surprise and slight discomfort during parts of the interview suggested she hadn't been prepared for that level of intensity and may have been experiencing something genuinely unscripted. The investigation into whether this interview was planned or spontaneous reveals conflicting reports. Some sources suggest AJ had clearance to be more aggressive than usual, while others claim he genuinely went off script and WWE decided to keep the footage because it was so compelling despite violating normal protocols. The most shocking theory is that this interview represents a fundamental shift in how WWE approaches backstage segments. If they're willing to allow performers to speak more authentically even when it creates uncomfortable moments, it could signal a new era of more realistic and emotionally resonant programming. Here's a question for the content strategy experts: does allowing more unscripted authentic moments improve wrestling programming even if it occasionally creates uncomfortable or controversial content? The most important consideration is whether AJ can actually deliver on all the specific threats and promises he made during this interview. He's essentially committed to systematically defeating every Judgment Day member while making each beatdown personal and meaningful, which is a massive creative commitment that could take months to fully execute. The testimonies from WWE creative team members reveal that AJ's interview has apparently forced them to completely restructure upcoming storylines to accommodate the specific revenge scenarios he promised. When your top star makes those kind of specific commitments on camera, you have to deliver on them or risk damaging credibility, one writer explained. But the most fascinating aspect is how this interview changes the power dynamics between AJ and the Judgment Day. By refusing to show fear or respect their numbers advantage, AJ has forced them to either back up their intimidation tactics or risk looking weak if they can't handle one veteran who's calling them out publicly. The comparison to other famous wrestling interviews where performers went off script or spoke too authentically is inevitable, but AJ's controlled intensity while simultaneously losing control creates a unique dynamic. He wasn't randomly ranting, he was strategically dismantling the Judgment Day's credibility while clearly operating on genuine emotion. Here's a question for the promo analysis experts: where does this AJ Styles interview rank among the most impactful and authentic backstage segments in recent WWE history? The most terrifying implication for the Judgment Day is that AJ's public challenge puts enormous pressure on them to respond with equal intensity. If they back down or fail to match his energy, they risk looking like the cowards he accused them of being, but if they escalate further, they might push this rivalry into genuinely dangerous territory. The investigation into how the Judgment Day plans to respond reveals they're apparently split between those who want to immediately attack AJ again to send a message, and those who recognize that his interview successfully baited them into a trap where any response makes them look reactive rather than in control. But perhaps the most important question is whether this interview represents a permanent change in AJ Styles' character or just a temporary emotional explosion. If he continues operating with this level of intensity and authenticity, it could revitalize his entire character and position him for another major championship run. The coming weeks will reveal whether AJ can back up the numerous specific threats he made, or whether the Judgment Day can successfully neutralize his momentum and make him regret calling them out so publicly. Either way, this interview has elevated their rivalry to a level of personal intensity that guarantees must-see television. Here's a final question for the entire WWE universe. After watching AJ Styles completely unleash on the Judgment Day during this interview, are you more excited to see him get his revenge, or do you think he's underestimating their numbers advantage? The wrestling world is buzzing about AJ Styles' explosive interview with Jackie Redmond, and the Judgment Day must be recognizing they've awakened something dangerous in the Phenomenal One. His systematic promises to dismantle their entire faction member by member weren't just threats, they were declarations of war from a legendary performer who has spent decades proving that he backs up every single word with devastating in-ring action. AJ Styles didn't just fire back at the Judgment Day, he declared open season on every member while specifically challenging Finn Bálor's leadership and courage. The personal nature of his comments, combined with the genuine emotion he displayed, has transformed this from a standard faction rivalry into the most personal and intense storyline on WWE programming. The Phenomenal One has promised revenge, and his legendary career suggests he'll deliver on every single threat he made.